to talk about something that I've been thinking about for a very long time. And I remember saying, even on the 956 drive home years ago or months ago, we should talk about just all the processed food that we eat and how that's bad for us. And there is a story today. It was posted on the 10th, so a few days ago. Ultra-processed foods now account for 2/3 of calories in the diets of children and teenagers. And I couldn't think that this article, this story is more important now just because of what we're seeing right now with the Delta variant. And I brought this up at the beginning of my show, is that if I understand the push for healthiness, I understand the push to protect our children, but on the same side, or on the other side, I wish people cared about what we are eating just as much as they did people and kids getting the vaccine. Joining me on 710 KURV is Jonathan Bailor. He is a healthy living expert. Now, you have a long title, Jonathan. You are the executive producer of the new food documentary, Better. You are a New York Times bestselling author. You are holder of 26 patents, founder, CEO of the world's fastest growing evidence-based wellness program, SANE Solutions. And just to shorten it up, you are a healthy living expert. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. Now, I'm so glad I have you on this show today because I want to learn more about the processed foods that we eat and the fact that 2/3 of what our children and teenagers eat is ultra processed. That to me can be very scary. One, thank you for joining us. And two, can you explain what it means to, or what processed foods are?
First, thank you for having me. And one thing we didn't include in my title I am the father of 2 beautiful daughters. So this story really hits home for me. And I also love what you mentioned about the Delta variant, because let's get one thing really clear. 90% of what is found in ultra-processed foods, we have no reason to believe is healthy for our children. None. There is no long-term studies. It is not approved by the FDA at all. It's not even regulated. So we need to just take a big step back here and say that our children, 2/3 of what is being put in their bodies, we definitively know is harmful. Definitively. Yep. So let's take some perspective and let's take care of our little ones, because this is chill-inducing.
No, yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's what I was saying at the beginning of my show, Jonathan, is how I understand parents are concerned. I understand, people are scared. I get it. I mean, you have 2 beautiful daughters. I'm a new mom. I have an 11-month-old little girl. And I was saying how she eats better than I do because I make sure she does not have none of the, I was about to say, CRAP that is in the processed food. She has the non-GMO stuff, the organic stuff. I mean, as healthy as it can come, as we can get, because her health matters to me. And I just feel parents need to understand that just because your child, for example, were to get the vaccine, that does not necessarily mean that they're healthy, because one thing that we saw, or we still see, is a lot of people who contract the virus, whether they're kids or adults, have an underlying condition. And a lot of people have obesity, are obese, are overweight, and sadly, children just seem to be gaining more and more and more weight. And also the pandemic caused a lot of kids to gain weight. So if you want to talk about health, okay, I get it. Talk about health, but talk about everything. Have that same momentum, that same energy in the vaccine, in the processed crap that they're eating.
That's exactly right. And let's be very clear here, is where this study is talking about ultra-processed food. So I think so many times we're all busy. I have a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, and you mentioned my title. I got a lot going on, right? So yeah. I can't always feed my daughters grass-fed this and whole foods this. And look, we live in a country full of food deserts as well. But there's a difference, like canned green beans and tuna fish in a can, that's not processed food, let alone ultra-processed. This study is saying 2/3 of what is going inside of our children's bodies is ultra-processed. So here's what an ultra-processed food is. Flip over a food, about 90% of what you see in the grocery store, and if you cannot pronounce what it's made out of, look at the ingredients list. That's ultra-processed. Or if, for example, there's something like cheese or yogurt that doesn't need to be refrigerated, that's a good sign it's ultra processed. It's not even in the ballpark of food. It is literally edible chemicals that contain calories.
Holy smokes. Wow. You brought up something, because this is honestly, Jonathan, I would love to have like an entire hour with you, because as a new mom, luckily I've been blessed, and I breastfed most of her entire life, and she's only 11 months. Barely started giving her formula. And I mean, now, I supplement feed. And I was just so amazed to see that formula contains corn syrup. And I thought to myself, why does formula contain corn syrup? Why, and then now that she's eating solids, before she was eating actual table food, we were giving her pouches, like the little pouches that you get at the grocery stores. But I never bought her the ones that do not need to be refrigerated, because I thought that was weird. How is it that these foods that we're giving our babies in these pouches have a shelf life of like 2 years? That doesn't make any sense. So the one I buy is refrigerated and has a shorter shelf life. Maybe that's not the healthiest out there, but at least it's a step in the right direction of what to give her.
And what you said right there is so key, a step in the right direction, right? The key thing here, right, is to do better. Look, we're talking 2/3 ultra processed. So it's not going to be difficult for us to do better here. That's why we named this film with Harvard Medical School Better, and we can do better. This same study, like, it's not all doom and gloom. In this same study, we also saw that calories from sugar-sweetened beverages dropped from about 11% to 5% of overall calories, mostly attributed to just making soda less available in schools and taxing it. So if we simply subsidize and make easier, better choices, we already have data showing we can do better. Like, this is a solvable problem, but to your point, we just need to make it a priority. And they're our kids. So let's make it a priority. Let's do better for them.
Joining me on 710 KURV is Jonathan Bailor. He is a healthy living expert with a long list of accolades to his name. Do you have a website where we can go find out more about what you've done and what you guys offer?
Absolutely. Please go to bettermovie.com. This is the documentary we just released with top doctors at the Harvard Medical School, showing us exactly how we can take action to live better today. bettermovie.com.
Awesome. And the reason I wanted to, I also wanted to talk about, because school is around the corner for so many parents, and we get it. Parents are busy. I mean, I honestly, as bad as it may sound, Jonathan, there are days when I would love me a double cheeseburger and an apple pie from McDonald's. As much as I know that it's not the best choice, there are a few days, not every day, not even every month, but every often. I mean, every now and then I get me a double cheeseburger. But because it's so hard sometimes for parents to be conscious of what their kids are eating, can you give us tips, tricks, advice on how to make sure we're feeding our kids better?
One of the number one tricks I found is we have a culture where we're hypersensitive to like gluten intolerances and allergies and things along those lines. So there is a vocabulary we can use, which, like, if you feel like you need to cross your fingers behind your back, you can. But for example, in my family, and frankly all Americans, we have a predisposition to diabetes. About 1 in every 3 Americans are diabetic or pre-diabetic. And if you don't have diabetes, you could say with a straight face, I'm pre-diabetic. I don't have diabetes yet. So if you tell a school, for example, my child is allergic to peanuts, they will protect your child from peanuts. If you tell a school, my child has celiac disease, they'll protect your child. So if you tell your school, my child is pre-diabetic, we have a genetic predisposition to diabetes, can you help keep her away from processed sugars and sweets? They have to keep her away from processed sugars and sweets. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. And sadly, Jonathan, we live in our area here in South Texas. I don't remember what doctor it was, but I clearly remember a few years ago speaking to a physician here in the Valley, and she mentioned that by 2025, which is in just a few short years, that 75% of us in the Rio Grande Valley where we live, we're going to be diabetic. And like you mentioned, I don't have diabetes, but hey, I guess I am pre-diabetic because we have family members in my family who are diabetic. So to protect and to take care of ourselves now, I think would be just a help in the long run.
And when you think about the fact that 2/3 of the calories our children are eating are ultra processed, they will all be diabetic. I'm not saying that tongue in cheek. It would be like if all of our children smoked 2 packs of cigarettes per day consistently, they would get lung cancer.
Yeah.
Our children are literally doing something that, this is going to sound a little crazy, but as a father, I genuinely mean this. If I had to choose between my daughters eating 2/3 of their calories from ultra-processed foods and smoking cigarettes, I would honestly give them cigarettes. That's how bad ultra-processed foods are for you.
No. And why do you think, or can we push this, Jonathan? And I don't want to sound like if I'm scared, we're scaring parents, but I think people need to understand, just as much as people are pushing these mask mandates, these vaccines. And we're not here to talk about that or argue about it or whatever, your choice, that's your choice. But just if you want to push this and say it's for their health, that's what pisses me off the most, Jonathan, because if you really cared about their health, if you really cared about their well-being, like you mentioned, you wouldn't be giving our kids all this processed nonsense that'll be more hurtful for them in the long run. You wouldn't be giving them the opportunities to become diabetic, which is an underlying condition in contracting COVID-19. Like, am I making any sense here?
You're absolutely making sense. And look, we do need to get upset, right? When we understood the damages that secondhand smoke did to our children, we weren't like, well, it's pretty inconvenient, so it's not. No, they're our kids. There is nothing more important than protecting our children, and we can solve this. We live in the most blessed country in the world. Mm-hmm. We have more resources than we know what to do with in this country. We absolutely can solve this problem. It's simply a matter of priority, and it's a matter of understanding. Like, here's the secret. It's not really a secret. Philip Morris, like, we're all against smoking. It's terrible. It's bad. They also own Kraft. They also own General Foods. The manufacturers of ultra-processed foods are the same companies that produce cigarettes. And that's why it's now 66% of the calories our kids are taking in. The same tactics and addictive practices are being put upon our children.
In the foods that they eat. That way they get used to eating something, and then it's a chemical addiction that they get at a young age, and it's hard for them to get out of it.
Exactly. And there's a term in science called hyperpalatability, which simply means there's a reason that kids don't like vegetables. Not because vegetables are inherently disgusting. It's that when you give your taste buds these ultra-processed foods, it's like they become desensitized to real food. Another example of this is a lot of parents tell me it's hard to get their kids to drink water. Well, if all you ever drink are sugar-sweetened beverages, yep, water is very bland. So we have to keep that in mind as well, too.
Oh, man. And my daughter is 11 months old, and she has never had a drop of juice in her life. And I have family members, give her some juice. And I'm like, why? I don't need to give her juice. She doesn't know what that tastes like. She is fine. All she has is water and mama's milk, and that's all she needs right now. So I don't know why parents would want it. But again, we're not here to judge the parents, but just give us, before we go, because we're almost out of time, again, tips how to make sure we're taking better care of what our kids eat, how to make better choices, and all that stuff.
The number one thing you could do, and it's not really a shameless plug, it's God's honest truth. If you could sit down with your children and watch the Better Movie, again, that's at bettermovie.com, we need to just take a step back. And there isn't a tip for this. This is a societal big mission where the next generation of children, who, by the way, have a shorter life expectancy than us as parents, we need to do better. We need to educate ourselves, and we can, and you can do that at bettermovie.com.
Jonathan, I certainly want to have you on the show again. So I'm going to text you very, very soon. Okay. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. That is Jonathan Bailor. He's a healthy living expert